They were a wealthy couple living the American dream.
He had immigrated from India. She was a typical Western Pennsylvania teenager.
They had fancy cars, a beautiful home. They lived a life that a lot of people would like to live.
Until a family weekend getaway ended in violence.
It's all hell they're breaking out. It's horrible.
And the call that we received was there was a gentleman that had a bloody nose. I'm like, whoa, what happened?
The investigation would uncover a trail of sex, drugs, and greed that culminated in an unbelievable conspiracy.
It just kept building and building and building.
May 13th, 2005. It's a busy Friday night on the Ohio Turnpike, just outside of Cleveland. But around 6:30 p.m., the routine commute is disrupted by cries for help from 45-year-old Donna Munda, whose car is parked in the emergency lane.
She was standing outside the vehicle and trying to wave down traffic. In the vehicle, there was a man bleeding from the nose.
A alert bypasser came by and saw that she was in distress, pulled over, saw a little bit of what was going on. He called 911.
The injured man is Donna's husband, 69-year-old Dr. Ghulam Munda. With them is her elderly mother, Dorothy Smouse. The caller doesn't know what happened, so responding officers aren't aware that they're about to walk onto a crime scene.
You can only imagine how chaotic it was. They've got a car pulled over next to vehicles that are going by 70 or 80 miles an hour and semis. The noise is deafening.
The initial call came in as a gentleman, a Ghulam, who had a bloody nose. That eventually changed as the trooper arrived on scene, and she was able to clarify and called it in as a gunshot wound. I'm like, whoa, okay, so what happened?
Ghulam Munda was born in India on August 10th, 1935. He grew up poor, but as a young man, he set his sights on a better life.
He had immigrated from India in the 70s to go to medical school, and he eventually ends up in Western Pennsylvania as the urologist in the area.
Dr. Munda was a very well-respected doctor in his community. He had purchased a house in an exclusive area of Pittsburgh, and he was all about giving an image of being a successful doctor.
He was well known in the community as being a very good man. His patients really liked him a lot, saying he always took the time to talk to them, to reassure them.
It was through his practice that Dr. Munda met the young woman who would become his wife, Donna Smouse.
Donna was very well known in the community. She had been a cheerleader in high school. She was energetic. She was popular. She was a typical Western Pennsylvania teenager.
Donna, at the age of 18, started working in the doctor's office, doing filing and things of the sort. And Dr. Munda took an interest in her.
They got very close very quickly. She just needed some guidance. She needed someone who could care for her, who could dote on her, who could support her.
Dr. Munda helped her make the decision to go to college, which she did do, and encouraged her to get a master's in nursing at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, which meant that she had to travel 2.5 hours each way to go to classes. He paid for everything.
Despite their age difference, the two seemed to make a perfect couple. In 1990, after more than a decade together, they finally got married.
Donna was working and going to school. Dr. Ghulam was a very well-respected doctor at his hospital. They had fancy cars, a beautiful home, a lot of good friends. They lived a life that a lot of people would like to live.
Traveling throughout the world, as well as going to extravagant restaurants in the area. living in a nice home that provided a sense of care, sense of security, as well as some of the opportunities that maybe she wasn't afforded when she was younger.
He treated her well. They got along. Dr. Munda helped her family as well. They had a good life.
But their good life would come to an unexpected and violent end. Now, Dr. Munda has been shot in the passenger seat of their car, and Ohio State Patrol officers are attempting to find out how.
We were able to see where the bullet had entered the right side of his face. He still had gunshot residue on his face and burn marks from the flash of the gun. That's how close the gun was to his temple.
There's all hell there breaking out. You got a major thoroughfare. The traffic is blocked up for miles. Donna began to give her husband CPR. Again, she was a nurse, so she knew how to do that. They call for a life flight helicopter. It's horrible. There's few crimes that you could think of that are worse than this. An unprovoked attack on an innocent man.
As investigators face the extraordinary scene, they must determine what could have led to the grisly shooting.
Crime is not high on the turnpike at all. You're basically locked in. It's a toll road, so there's no easy way on or off without going through gates.
There's vandalism, there's shoplifting, there's crimes of that nature that occur. We don't handle that many shootings, so there is all sorts of things racing through my mind at the time.
Coming up, investigators construct a timeline of the shooting, which reveals a possible suspect.
They were in line to get something to eat.
That's when she said, you got to be careful.
Ohio police have responded to the roadside shooting of 69-year-old Dr. Ghulam Munda. As helicopter medics arrive on scene, investigators turn to the victim's wife to piece together what happened.
They're not sure what happened, and they're trying to question Donna, who was virtually beside herself.
Donna claimed a van pulled up behind them. Gunman approaches the car, demands Dr. Munda's wallet. He gives him the wallet, and then the gunman just shoots him right in the head.
Despite heroic attempts to save his life, it's already too late.
He was gone. There was no way anybody could have saved him, just because of the location of the bullet wound.
The projectile entered his right side of his temple and hit something inside the brain, and the shot continued and came to rest at his neck, right in the spine. There was no exit wounds on him. The round stayed inside.
Now facing a homicide investigation, Highway Patrol officers call for backup and begin processing the crime scene.
We went back to the vehicle and saw the shell casing under the rocker panel that was preserved by the initial trooper responding to the scene.
The bullet casing from a 9mm handgun. That was about the only physical evidence that they were able to retrieve from the scene of the crime.
We took some blood samples from the pooling, and that was about it. We weren't able to do any fingerprints.
With so little to go on, police hope the doctor's wife, Donna, and his mother-in-law can provide them with a better lead.
I proceeded to interview Donna and her mom, and Donna began to tell me that they were headed to Toledo because Dr. Munda's nephew, who he considered a son, had just graduated from med school. He accepted a job, I believe, in the Toledo area, and they were looking for a home for him.
Donna says they left Toledo around 4:30 p.m. After about an hour on the road, they decided to make a pit stop.
She said that they'd gone to the service plaza initially because they wanted something to drink and use the restrooms. They went in and used the restrooms, then they were in line to get something to eat, and her husband pulled his wallet out.
The doctor always carried a lot of cash. He carried $100 bills, $50 bills, and that day had a big wad of $50 bills. The person didn't have change at this vending place, so Donna paid for it. His flashing this money was of concern to Donna, and there was some conversation about that. You ought to be careful about flashing money like that.
And it seems she may have been right to be concerned. Donna tells detectives that they'd been back on the road for a little while when it happened.
Dr. Munda asked Donna to drive so he can get some sleep. It had been a long day. It was the end of the week. So Donna started to drive, and he woke up from his nap. And shortly after that, Dr. Munda said to Donna, "Why don't you pull off in that emergency exit, and I'll get back and drive." So she pulled off to the emergency exit, and she sees this guy running up behind them.
She stated the assailant was there like instantaneously and asked for Dr. Munda's wallet.
So this person must have seen him at the rest area with his wallet open with all the cash. He must have been following them and just pulled over when they decided to pull over.
She said she had Dr. Munda's wallet in her purse.
She pulls the wallet out, gives it to Dr. Munda, who apparently hands it to the killer.
Next thing Donna can recall is that her husband's being shot. She hears a muffled pop like, and she said the assailant fled.
Both Donna and her mother said that this shooting was over in seconds.
Unfortunately, neither of the eyewitnesses is able to provide a good description of the shooter.
Donna's mother, who was in the back seat, she's a very small lady, and the seat sits down very low. So all she could say basically was, I heard a loud bang.
The description that Mrs. Munda gave us of the assailant was a person about her husband's stature. She couldn't tell if it was black or white, but he was wearing all black mask and gloves, and he also drove a minivan.
Investigators immediately begin the hunt for their suspect. Detectives call the Munda's bank to see if the thief has used any of the couple's credit cards, but there has been no suspicious activity.
Police did put out a description and alert for a van that the suspect was driving, but beyond that, they really did not have much to go on.
We had contacted the toll plazas to see if we could see any vehicles coming through, and they did not notice anything unusual. Nobody came through. There are no vans. They don't recall seeing it.
Just days after the shooting, Donna Munda gives an interview from their home and makes a public plea for assistance.
During the TV interview, Donna talked about her husband, what a kind and generous man he was. She missed him a great deal. She doesn't know how she's going to live without him.
I said, please don't leave me. Please don't, baby. Because what they told me that night, I died with him. You just don't know.
Coming up, investigators consider if Donna's tears are genuine or an attempt to throw them off.
She just came off as fake. When you see how people react, I don't know what it is, but you just can tell this is not real.
After her husband's murder investigation hit a dead end, Donna Munda has given an emotional interview to help police come up with a suspect. Instead, Donna's performance turns suspicion on her.
Donna portrayed her marriage as solid, no problems, could not think of a reason why anyone would want to kill her husband. It just seemed like she was saying what she thought people would want to hear. And it was all an act.
And I kept talking to him, trying to tell him, please hang in there, please. I'm doing everything I can. I said, help's on the way. I said, help is on the way. I tried so hard to help him. And I couldn't say something.
I think the interview was very, very damaging because right off the bat, there wasn't a single person that I didn't talk to after that interview where they didn't say, Donna had something to do with it.
But investigators have nothing else to suggest she was involved. That is, until a woman named Charlene calls in.
Sees on the news that Dr. Munda had been shot. She said, "You should know that Donna Munda and my boyfriend are having an affair."
Charlene's boyfriend is 23-year-old Damian Bradford. He and Donna met in 2004 after a sudden tragedy turned her life upside down.
Donna was a very typical suburban woman, worshipped her father. They were very, very close. And when her father died, that really set her into a tailspin, where she really struggled with his death.
When someone dies, people grieve in different ways. It seems like, Donna Munda turned to drugs.
She was addicted to fentanyl patches. In fact, she had lost her nursing license due to the fentanyl she was stealing from the hospital.
She admitted it, basically, and got herself in a treatment in lieu of conviction process. In other words, if you're charged with theft of drugs, as she was, you could enter into a program. If you successfully complete that program, you don't have a conviction, and that's where she met Damian Bradford.
Damian could not have been more different from Dr. Munda. Damian was a player, very smooth, several girlfriends, and no real job.
But while Donna was connecting with Damian, her marriage was falling apart.
Their relationship suffered a great deal because of the drug addiction. The doctor was embarrassed, and it was a reflection on him as well, that he had a wife who was a drug addict. As a very respected physician in Mercer County, the Hermitage area, that made Dr. Munda look bad too.
She began paying for things, and it's not unsimilar to how her relationship began with Dr. Munda. She began providing for Mr. Bradford and giving him an experience that maybe he wasn't used to. And she purchased a new car, she paid for an apartment for him, and bought him jewelry and clothing.
One day, Damian and Donna were caught by Damian's girlfriend in Damian's apartment that was being paid for by Donna. She called Dr. Munda and told him, "I don't know if you know this, but my boyfriend is having an affair with your wife." So obviously, Dr. Munda confronted Donna.
Investigators believe Damian was the one who had the most to lose if the relationship ended.
She knew that Donna was supporting him, in other words. It was paying for clothing and jewelry and apartment and cars, and that she thought that Damian may have had something to do with the death of Dr. Munda.
I would say that money and greed driving criminal behavior is definitely not uncommon. And it's definitely not uncommon when there is passion, emotion, and love involved. That's why we call it crimes of passion.
Donna admits to the affair, but insists that Damian had no reason to kill her husband.
She just wanted to be happy like every one of us, and living with Dr. Munda at the time was not a happy place for her. They had grown apart. They were not getting along. A divorce was something that she was willing to do. A divorce was something that Dr. Munda was willing to do.
I think Dr. Munda had just had enough of the drug abuse and the rehab, and things just were falling apart because of that.
It seems Donna doesn't have a motive either. Donna would have been able to easily support herself after her divorce.
Before she stopped practicing as a nurse, was earning close to $170,000 a year. I mean, a nurse anesthetist is a really highly regarded and responsible position. She had a lot of money.
But if Damian and Donna didn't kill her husband, who did?
Donna had described the gunman as about 5'2" and wearing a mask, which obviously didn't match him.
Damian was closer to 6 feet tall.
I didn't know what to believe. Is she telling me the truth, or what exactly is going on?
Coming up, investigators put Damian Bradford in the hot seat.
Police got a search warrant for Damian's apartment. They found a stack of $50 bills.
Donna Mundis says her affair with Damian Bradford had nothing to do with her husband's murder. Detectives aren't so sure.
The more that investigators are poking through everything, you're finding out affairs, drug rehab, everything. And it just kept building and building and building.
We had our suspicions, but we really didn't know.
Investigators suspect he killed the doctor so he wouldn't lose Donna's financial support. But when police question Damian, he stays tight-lipped.
Ghulam and Donna had made a decision to consider divorce. And during that, they decided they were going to continue to live under the same roof, as they always had, and that Donna was free to date if she wanted to, and that Ghulam was free to date if he wanted to.
Damian denied having anything to do with the shooting. He told police that he was at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting at that time.
When investigators look into Damian's alibi, however, it's not as airtight as he'd have them believe.
Members that were at the meeting, they remembered him having come in late that day, and when they did the math, they figured out that if he had been the perpetrator of Dr. Mundis' murder, that he had had enough time to travel back from the scene of the crime to the scene of the NA meeting.
It's enough for Ohio police to obtain a search warrant for Damian's apartment. What they find is even more incriminating.
They go to his apartment, they find a bunch of money, $50 bills, which was what Dr. Munda had been carrying.
Police also found multiple cell phones, burner phones.
They started getting warrants to dump the phones, in other words, to extract the data from the phones.
In the meantime, a hidden stash of drugs gives investigators an excuse to take him into custody.
We found needles, little vials of steroid compound. We found out that Damian was actually selling the steroids out on the streets.
Him being on probation and him being in possession of that drug, we were able to arrest him.
When police retrieve the cell phone data, it becomes clear that Damian had been using them for something much more dangerous than selling drugs.
They contained text messages between Donna and Damian.
Thousands and thousands of texts that showed that they communicated a lot, even on the day of the murder.
Police were able to develop a very strong timeline where Donna and Damian were coordinating. Okay, we're leaving now. We'll be here at this point. We'll be here at that point. They were able to just completely chart out through those text messages what those two did.
We were able to track their movements on the Ohio Turnpike from pinging the cell towers. And we were able to map a course from Hermitage, PA, through Ohio and back to Hermitage.
Damian stopped at the service plaza when Dr. Munda, Donna, and her mother did, and that he followed them out of the service plaza as well. So through those cell phone records, they were able to put Damian at that crime scene.
The text messages also prove Donna has been lying to them.
If she wasn't in a relationship like she said, it would have caught her by surprise, like, what is he doing here? So she knew he was there. She knew he was following them. Everything we obtained from the phone records indicated, yes, this shows that they were together in on this.
But it's still not enough evidence to prove she conspired to kill her husband.
They executed search warrants at her home. They executed search warrants on her computers. They got her phone records. They looked at everything and all of her involvement with Bradford and all of that. And after a year of that, they still could not charge her So after Damien was arrested for a violation of probation, the government made a decision to let him out. The idea was, let's release Damien and see what him and Donna do.
Investigators wiretapped Donna's phone, hoping to catch the lovers talking about the crime.
I'm glad you got out.
Yeah, they let me out yesterday.
I know, I saw.
I wasn't able to call. They got all my shit, my phone, everything. Struggling. Bad.
Same here.
Really?
Yeah. Oh my God. It's a nightmare.
I need to see you, though.
Okay.
There was nothing incriminating in their discussions. But the fact that when Damien was released from prison for that short week period of time, that he focused on getting together with Donna was something of great interest to the government.
Prosecutors may not be able to arrest Donna yet, but they believe they have more than enough to charge Damien.
They ultimately ended up charging him with the use of a firearm that results in death and the transporting across state lines. These are all federal crimes, so Damien was looking at the death penalty.
Police still believe Donna was involved, but they did not have the evidence to charge her. They didn't believe what she was saying, but their hands were tied because they didn't have a smoking gun.
In the hopes of getting him to testify against Donna, prosecutors offered Damien a deal: take his chances with the death penalty, or cooperate and spend less than 20 years behind bars.
I mean, who would say no to that? You can either stay in jail till you're 80 or stay in jail till you're 39. All you gotta do is say she was part of it.
Coming up, will Damien take the fall for Donna or turn on her?
The only way he could save himself was to serve up Donna on a plate.
Damien Bradford is facing a possible death sentence for the May 2005 murder of Dr. Ghulam Munda. But weeks before his trial, prosecutors offer him one last chance to cooperate.
In return for that cooperation, the government agreed that they would dismiss all the death specifications in his case. He would receive a sentence of 17 and a half years for his participation in this crime.
Still, the deal isn't enough to shake his devotion.
I think he believed up until the end somehow. He testified that if he went to trial, that Donna would testify on his behalf.
He is counting on Donna to get on the witness stand and say he had nothing to do with it. The description of the shooter did not match Damien. I know he didn't have anything to do with it.
But as Damien's trial date approaches, that's not exactly how things play out.
Shortly before the trial, the government had subpoenaed Donna to testify, and we notified the court that we would be asserting our fifth.
She declares she is not going to testify. And with that, Damien knew he had very little chance of getting out of these charges. The only way he could save himself was to serve up Donna on a plate. He immediately goes to investigators and said, "Yeah, I did it, but I did it because Donna made me do it."
According to Damien, Donna started planning her husband's murder shortly after they decided to get a divorce.
Donna actually wanted a divorce, but they had a prenup before they got married.
Dr. Munda was to give her $250,000 in cash and share in some cars and other household things and things of that nature.
But she knew he was worth $3 to $6 million, so she came up with this murder plot. She figured she'll get more money, and that's how she eventually convinced Damien to be part of it.
Donna had promised a life of luxury together, saying once we have his millions, we can spend the rest of our lives together and just enjoy life as a couple.
Damien says it took months for her to decide on the perfect place and time.
Dr. Munda, often visited a mosque in Youngstown, Ohio, which is near Hermitage where they lived, and he would go there to worship once a week. She first thought he should do it there, but it never worked out. So then she told him that they're going to Toledo and that he could do it then.
Investigators were shocked how cold-blooded it was that Donna had her mother in the car with them to act as a witness. They just could not believe someone would put their mother in that kind of danger.
On Friday, May 13th, 2005, they finally put her plan into action.
He says that they had some kind of a system where she would notify him when they were leaving, and that he could follow them, and that she would pull over, and then he could feign some kind of robbery attempt and then shoot him during that feigned robbery.
Damien tells investigators that after he shot the doctor, he took his wallet and fled the scene. A few miles down the road, he threw most of the evidence and the murder weapon out of the window.
You know, like any highway, the median is a large grass area. And over the course of the next couple of months, whoever was cutting the grass apparently must have been told, look out for any items of clothing or anything like that. And they had found the wallet, some things that had been dumped out of the wallet, a ski mask, a black hat. I think they found a black jacket, all of which Damien acknowledged was him.
He also revealed where the location of the murder weapon was. The murder weapon matched this shell casings and other evidence obtained at the scene.
Damien agreed to testify against Donna, and within a day or so of that announcement, police did not waste any time in arresting her.
On July 24th, 2006, Donna Munda is arrested and charged with first-degree murder.
They had made the decision to go ahead and prosecute her for a capital offense. So all of a sudden, Donna, who had been very well respected as a wife of a revered doctor and a successful nurse anesthetist in her own right, went from there to being accused of being an adulterer and a drug user and a liar.
But the key to a conviction of Donna rests on not only jurors believing that the evidence puts Damien at the scene as the shooter, but they also have to believe Damien's story, that this is Donna's idea. I did it because Donna promised me money.
Coming up, will the word of a convicted drug dealer be enough to get a conviction?
It all comes down to who do they believe more, Damien or Donna?
Damien Bradford has confessed to the murder of 69-year-old Ghulam Munda, but he says it was the doctor's estranged wife, Donna, who orchestrated it. Now, it's up to a jury to decide if Damien is telling the truth.
This happened in our backyard. So for me, personally, it took me a while to, like, hey, separate, is this live or is this fiction?
On June 18th, 2007, Donna's trial begins. Prosecutors paint her as a greedy woman who murdered her soon-to-be ex-husband to keep his estimated $6 million fortune.
Prosecutors weren't thrilled about the deal that they had with Damien, but they realized that unless they had Damien testify against Donna, there was no way they could get a conviction on Donna.
They believed that Donna and Damien had entered into a conspiracy, that the goal of which was to execute Dr. Munda so that Donna could get the money and the inheritance, and Damien and Donna could go off and live forever happy. That was the government's theory of the case.
However, her defense insists the state's theory doesn't add up.
How can anyone rationalize her knowledge of this event and her conspiracy with Damien Bradford to kill her husband. How can that be rationalized when the first thing she does after he's shot is to try to resuscitate him?
She would never had planned a crime of this nature and put her mother in the back seat to be feet away from the execution.
But prosecutors asked the jury to consider, if Donna wasn't in on the crime, then why didn't she recognize her own boyfriend as the killer?
Donna had described the gunman as about 5'4" and wearing a mask, which obviously that identification turned out to be very misleading.
Of course Donna misled me because she wanted to point the finger to someone else.
The government kept harping on the fact that Donna had to have recognized the voice of Damien Bradford. But you've got semis going both ways. At 70, 80 miles an hour, you cannot hear much of anything.
The trial drags on for more than 2 weeks, with both sides presenting compelling arguments. Finally, Damien Bradford takes the stand.
Damien did express great remorse for shooting the doctor. He said he knew it was wrong, he shouldn't have done it, but he knew this is what Donna wanted.
However, Damien admits that to him, it wasn't ever about love.
During the trial, Damien was asked directly, once you got the money, what were you going to do? And he looked at Donna directly and said, I was going to leave her. I have never seen such a physical reaction in a courtroom in my life. She immediately crumbled. Those words were a punch to her gut. The defense attorneys went hard after Damien on the stand, pointing out that he was a convicted drug dealer, that he absolutely could not be believed, that he was making up this entire story just to save himself and to sacrifice Donna. But Damien, he was a very, very believable witness. When the jury finally gets the case, it all comes down to who do they believe more, Damien or Donna?
On July 6th, 2007, after less than a day of deliberations, the jury finds Donna Munda guilty of all charges. To her defense team, the verdict is a miscarriage of justice.
We were surprised at the verdict when it came back. I couldn't imagine that anybody would rely upon a Damien Bradford, given what he was given by the government, in exchange for his testimony.
The deal that he got, 17 and a half years, that really didn't sit well with me. I thought that his sentence should have been a lot longer for killing someone. He was the trigger man. She got life. My feeling was he deserved to get life as well.
And they thought that she didn't act the way a widow should act, whatever that means. That became Exhibit A, and that set them on their path to prove Donna was guilty. There's only really 2 cases in my career that I think they got the wrong guy, and this is one of them.
But to investigators, as well as the patients and loved ones of Dr. Munda, justice had been served. As far as they were concerned, Donna was a woman whose greed had driven her to commit the ultimate act of betrayal.
We finally got an ending. We can get justice for Dr. Munda and Dr. Munda's family and his friends and professionals who wanted to put some closure on this.
Because of Donna, Damien had gotten used to a certain lifestyle, but I don't know how long that was going to last. I don't know if Damien was worried that eventually Donna would leave him. I don't know why these two felt that they could kill the doctor and get away with it.
wealthy California family living the perfect life.
They were well-connected, very successful, wonderful people.
Until it was all shattered by unimaginable violence.
People slain in their own home on Easter Sunday. That was a shock.
This case was like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle.
The investigation would take detectives on a 3-year manhunt ranging from the farms of Fresno to international drug cartels to catch a killer driven by greed.
Some referred to it as Fresno County's crime of the century.
You just couldn't imagine the level of evilness.
April 21st, 1992. Around 9 a.m., police in Fresno, California receive a panicked call from the housekeeper of a local millionaire, 59-year-old businessman Dale Ewell.
Housekeeper Juanita Avita arrived at her usual time. She came into the house and she immediately noticed that a door that leads to the kitchen was closed, which was highly unusual. She went in and at that point saw Tiffany laying face down in a puddle of blood. She then ran over to the neighbor's house and the police were called.
Tiffany Ewell is Dale's 24-year-old daughter. When officers arrive, they immediately see she's been dead for some time.
When we first went inside, you could see as you walked into the kitchen the body of Tiffany. She was laying down with her head kind of pointed towards the southeast next to the dining room table. We surmised that she had been shot in the back of the head, just from where the blood was.
But when police search the rest of the house, they discover Tiffany is not the only victim.
There's a hallway that goes to the east from the dining room. And as we walked that way, it went into like a den or a study area. You could see the body of Glee. And as we walked that direction, you could see that the body of Dale was laying in another hallway just outside the den. He had a bunch of newspapers in his hand underneath him and around him.
They discovered it was not one death, but 3.
Tiffany, her 57-year-old mother Glee, and her father Dale have all been shot. But why would anyone murder a family like the Ewells?
The family was a very prominent family in Fresno County. They were well-connected, very successful, wonderful people, and by all counts, a happy family.
Dale was a retired Air Force pilot from Ohio, and Glee was a former teacher. They'd gotten married in 1961 and moved to California to start a new life together.
Dale was involved in airplane business and made a good living through that as well as through farming. His wife Glee was known for being involved in the community as a volunteer in different ways.
In 1967, Glee gave birth to their first child, Tiffany. Their son Dana came 4 years later in 1971. By then, Dale had become so successful that he invested in agricultural real estate. He soon amassed an $8 million fortune. Glee quit teaching to devote her time to philanthropy.
Glee was a community activist, just a wonderful person who did a great deal of volunteer work within the community.
Glee was a force of nature in a very nice way. She was an appointee to the State Bar Board of Governors. She also became the executive director of the Fresno Regional Foundation.
Everybody seemed to, in most circles, know either Dale or Glee. They were very successful in what they did.
But you'd never know the Ewells were millionaires by looking at them.
Fresno is a great community. We are based in agriculture. Everyone in the community is either a farmer, works for a farmer, or had family that was a farmer.
The Ewells had more wealth than most people in Fresno, and being able to fly airplanes and drive Mercedes and that sort of thing. But, aside from those kinds of trappings, I wouldn't call them a flashy family.
The Ewells did not flaunt their wealth at all. For the amount of money that they were worth, they were very, very conservative.
They made sure their children were given the opportunity to succeed as well. By 1992, Tiffany was a grad student at Fresno State, while Dana was studying business at Santa Clara University.
Lee's children, I gathered, were a bit different. Tiffany, their daughter, was far more quiet, reserved, but wonderful in her way. And Lee would speak glowingly about her.
She was just a very nice young lady who was reserved, did not have a ton of friends that she would socialize with. She was more family-oriented, but everybody who knew her seemed to like her.
Dana was clearly the apple of Lee's eye. She spoke with great passion about his outgoing personality, his intellectual capabilities, his business acumen.
Dana stood out as a intense, well-groomed, corporate type of young man.
Dale and Dana had a fairly good father-son relationship.
They were, by all counts, a happy family.
But now, 3 members of the Ewell family have been brutally murdered, and Fresno police are determined to find out why.
It was what we call a triple, and the fact that this was an affluent family in a decent part of town, and not your typical victims. So the whole unit responded out to this particular scene.
Coming up, if someone is targeting the Ewell family, could Dana be next?
We didn't know if Dana Ewell was still alive. We didn't know if he had not been massacred somewhere between their house and wherever he was. We just didn't know.
Millionaire Dale Ewell, his wife Glee, and their daughter Tiffany have been murdered in their Fresno, California home. And as investigators search the crime scene, the evidence begins to paint a disturbing picture.
A homicide scene tells a story, and this one told a pretty clear story.
The way the bodies were all spread out, it kind of gave us an idea on how the crime had gone down.
It was clear that Tiffany was killed first, that she did not know what was coming. She was just standing in the kitchen and got shot in the back of the head.
She was probably dead before she hit the floor. We believe that Glee saw this happen and actually saw the killer.
Glee then ran from Tiffany's killer, ran into a den that she was shot multiple times.
As she laid on the ground on her side, the killer stood above her, and she actually looked up at him and was trying to basically, I guess, say no. And he shot her again while standing above her.
She had her keys in her hand and in death had a look of fright on her face.
After shooting the 2 women, it appears the killer then ambushed Dale.
As he's walking down the hallway, the killer comes out from a bedroom and shoots him once in the head. And I think he was dead before he hit the ground also.
The blood has dried, which tells police the attack occurred some time ago. But was it the result of a robbery gone wrong, or something else?
There was a box of 9mm shells in the nightstand in the master bedroom. And apparently Dale had a gun that went with that, a 9mm handgun, that was missing.
The home had been ransacked quite a bit, and so the initial thought was that this could be a burglary. But upon closer inspection, there were a lot of inconsistencies with the burglary.
We scoured the house, every entryway, every nook and cranny that anybody could get through that house. No signs of forced entry, the way the drawers were opened and then closed. Burglars didn't do that. You leave them open so you don't touch them twice. It was, we felt, to make it look like a burglary had occurred and that Glee and Tiffany and Dale had interrupted a burglar.
In fact, the evidence seems to suggest that whoever did this was a professional.
Normally, we would expect to find just hair strands, fingerprints, a point of entry. It was incredible how little forensics was able to find in a 4-day inspection.
We really didn't find much of anything except the expended rounds. The precision of the shots, especially to Tiffany and Dale, one shot to the head, this is a hit.
But why would a killer target Dale and his family on Easter weekend? When investigators talked to neighbors, they learned the Ewells spent the holiday weekend at their beach house in nearby Pajaro Dunes. Their son Dana had returned from college to go with them.
We didn't know there was a family member missing until we did some interviews with some people who knew the family. We're concerned that maybe he's to be another victim.
At the time of the murders, Dana was a student at Santa Clara University. Law enforcement had to follow up to make sure that he was safe.
Thankfully, they find Dana safe at school. He flies back to Fresno to speak with investigators.
Dana had said he was trying to reach the family and couldn't.
He did not react in a way that one would expect. He didn't shed tears over it.
Didn't show any emotion. And part of that could have been shock.
Do you know of any reason why anybody would want your family dead? Nothing, sir.
And he said that he didn't know of anyone who would want his family dead, other than saying that his father was involved with some pretty high-level individuals, and he didn't know if any of those people could have wanted his family dead.
Dana tells investigators he last saw his family 2 days ago at Easter dinner. He brought his girlfriend and her family to meet them.
He's dating at the time the daughter of an FBI agent in San Jose.
They invited them to dinner there at the beach house. So there's Dana and Monica, his girlfriend, and then her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Zent. It was apparently a great dinner, and then when they all left,
Dana went back with the Zents to their home. Dale flew home, and Glee and Tiffany drove home.
Dale didn't like all of them flying together or all of them driving together because he was worried that if something were to happen, he didn't want the whole family to die together. He wanted somebody to be alive.
Ironically, that meant Dale would arrive too late to save his wife and daughter. By the time he gets home, his family members have already been killed. But detectives find the timing rather curious.
Tiffany and Glee had gotten home first. When they got into the dining room, the killer was waiting in the family room just around a corner.
Approximately 30 minutes later, Dale ended up coming home through the garage. Why would a person who just committed 2 murders wait 30 to 40 minutes for somebody else to come home? That was very strange.
Coming up, investigators discovered that the Ewells had some powerful enemies.
These people were targeted to die, period. That gets you back to the question, who benefits by this hit?
3 members of the Ewell family have been murdered during the Easter holidays. Police believe the gunman had access to the house, but the sole survivor, the Ewell's son Dana, has an airtight alibi.
At the time of the murders, he's with the FBI agent's family, hours away from the Ewell home.
They checked out everything he had said, and he had been with Monica over in the Santa Clara area.
The autopsy report provides investigators with a few more cryptic clues.
The pathologists recovered the bullets from the bodies, and the bullets looked like something that law enforcement, at least in Fresno, had never seen before.
Some of the expended rounds that we had found in Glee had some really unique striation marks.
The detectives put quite a bit of work into figuring out what could possibly have made those striations.
The bullets turned out to be a match for the ones found on the nightstand in Dale and Glee's bedroom.
We believe that the killer knew that those rounds were there, used those rounds to load up his gun, and committed the murders, and then stole the 9mm also.
There are also traces of a strange substance.
One of the other things we found were microscopic little bitty pieces of yellow fuzz, if you will. Little pieces of yellow material on Glee's clothing. We didn't know what that was.
The evidence only raises more questions. But by now, the triple homicide has made the news, and Fresno police feel the pressure to come up with answers.
It was a case that, frankly, fascinated me. I watched it in the news. I reviewed all the media and wondered where this case was going to end up.
We had to find a motive. So they started to look into backgrounds of Dale, Glee, and Tiffany to see what they could find out. Talking to family members, talking to friends, talking to whoever, find out what they were into.
Dana spoke highly of Tiffany and said that she was a harmless creature and that he couldn't think of anyone who would possibly want to hurt Tiffany.
She was Daddy's little girl. She was very protected by her parents. She had apparently been in an accident when she was younger and received some trauma to her brain. And from everything we could find, she didn't have a mean bone in her body. There was no reason why she needed to be killed.
During the course of the investigation, authorities discover that Glee hadn't always been an unassuming teacher.
Earlier in her life, she had worked for the CIA. And I went, wow, well, that's a big deal. So that was something they looked into. And it turned out not to be a covert type of position in the CIA. It was something a little less glamorous.
In recent years, she'd become an outspoken civic activist. Was it possible she'd made enemies of the wrong people?
Glee was in a position of power, serving on a high-level state bar committee, and was involved in decision-making that could have led someone to become very upset with her.
People do crazy things, and we didn't know if maybe someone who wanted to be a judge got passed over and just got fed up with it.
We had to eliminate those people as possible suspects.
As investigators dig further, they find out Dale was in business with some dangerous people as well.
He took over a business from a guy who went to prison.
The person who owned Western Piper apparently had gotten some problems with running drugs with planes, and Dale swooped in and bought the company out from under him. The detectives were wondering at the time, is he mad that he lost this business the way he did?
Were the Ewells executed on the orders of a drug runner?
There was a lot of territorial gang violence where gangs were fighting over where the lines were drawn for their territory.
We had the Bloods, we had the Crips, we have NF, or Nuestra Familia. We had an influx of Asian gangs when the Hmongs came into the Central Valley, and a lot of them settled in the Fresno area. But one of our biggest problems was the Bulldog gang. They've been a thorn in the side of law enforcement for a long time in this area. They were kind of independent from everybody else, and there's different sects. They really have no hierarchy. They fight each other. They've been a problem in the Fresno County area for a long time.
Gang murders were pretty much at an all-time high. I believe the murders that year were over 100.
Detectives learned that Dale's plane was stolen the day after the murders. They immediately put out an alert, hoping it might connect them to the cartels. But instead, the lead takes them somewhere unexpected.
Dale apparently had a plane at Western Piper who belonged to an attorney out of Las Vegas. And apparently the plane had needed some work done. The attorney had actually gone and got his plane. He went and jumped in and got his plane out of there. The timing was really bad on the attorney's part. That's something that they talked to him about. He was interviewed, and that was put to rest.
Fresno police have hit a dead end at every turn so far. But have they been asking the right questions?
All the possible motives, it really comes back to who's going to benefit from this.
Coming up, one name keeps coming back to the top of their list.
He studied billionaires. He wrote to billionaires. He asked for jobs with people who were billionaires.
Detectives investigating the Ewell family murders have been unable to come up with any solid leads, but they soon realized that they looked past one suspect a little too early.
Who stands to gain the amount of money that these people are worth? And that came back to Dana.
As the sole surviving family member, Dana stands to inherit Dale and Glee's entire $8 million estate. But is he capable of murder?
Dana's personality was completely the opposite of anybody in his immediate family. I would describe him as eccentric. When he was in high school, he would wear suits and carry a briefcase. He would flash money. He would buy girls that he liked expensive bottles of perfume. Everybody in the school was aware of Dana Ewell and his love for money.
He kept a collection of billionaires. You know, most kids his age are collecting baseball and football cards, and here he is. His idea of, collecting memorabilia was about people who had become billionaires and millionaires.
He studied billionaires. He wrote to billionaires. We even had some of the copies of letters. We refer to it as the billionaire collection.
He was clearly aiming for a position of prominence in the world and wanted to be regarded as a wealthy businessman.
Investigators have already confirmed Dana was nowhere near his family's home the day of the murders. But his behavior begins to raise suspicion, starting with the funerals.
He was very cheap about buying coffins for his family members, and the way he reacted at the funeral by treating it more like a social event than the way that you would expect any normal human being to act.
He was working the room. He commented on a lady's diamond ring. He was not acting like the grieving son. As detectives, that's where your spidey senses start to come in. Not only did he do that, but he didn't want to cooperate with us anymore. He actually got an attorney, and he wanted us to go through his attorney to talk to him, and which was really bizarre for a sole survivor of a family. Your family's been murdered. You don't want to work with the law enforcement agency that's trying to solve the case.
He acts even more strangely at the reading of the will.
Dana found out for the first time that his father had set up the trust so that he would not get any money until he was 35, which was more than a decade away.
He jumped up and he slammed his hand on the table and he said, "Why did my father do this to me?" And that shocked everyone. Dale's brothers, they said this isn't right, and they brought their concerns to Detective Souza and Detective Burke at that time.
Greed is a powerful motive, and police know that Dana didn't have to pull the trigger himself to be involved.
There are the allegations that young Dana Ewell wants to inherit $7 or $8 million from his parents. He's willing to hire a gunman to kill his mother, his father, his sister on Easter Sunday.
There was a lot of investigation to do up in Santa Clara regarding Dana and just finding out about him and what he was all about.
Classmates tell detectives they should speak with Dana's best friend, Joel Radovich.
It was a weird friendship because Joel was diametrically different than Dana. Dana, this arrogant $1,000 suit rich boy, and Joel, the scrubby, sleeps wherever he can find a place, rides a skateboard, new wave hippie type.
His whole contention that he wasn't really close with Dana and, saw him a little bit, but, they weren't really that as tight as people on campus had made them out to be.
Joel confirms everything Dana told them, but detectives soon discover that both young men are lying.
Now we've got two people that people say are really close, and they're both saying, no, they're not really close. And one of the detectives happened to see Joel driving down the freeway, and he followed him, and he was actually staying at Dana's house.
The hallway still had blood and gray matter from Dale's brain on the sides of the walls. So on a daily basis, Dana and Joel are walking past the blood and gray matter from Dana's father as if it's no big deal.
When we started to key on Dana and Joel as having something to do with the homicides is when we decided to start setting up the surveillances.
For someone unemployed, Joel seems to be living very well.
Dana paid for Joel's helicopter flight lessons in Fresno and didn't even hide it. We were able to show that Dana withdrew $125,000 in cash, that Joel spent about $75,000 in cash.
But Joel hasn't spent all of the money on flight lessons. He's also bought several books that investigators find incriminating.
Books that we were able to discover that Joel obtained was a book called Hitman. It was how you do your job as a professional hitman. It was generally pretty well written, but it had horrible pieces of advice in it. One was, if you are questioned by police, ask, "Are you going to arrest me?" That's exactly what Joel did.
The manual also contains instructions on how to build a silencer.
That coupled with taking the flying lessons, I think he wanted to be an international hitman. You know, I don't know. I don't think he had any other goal in life.
Coming up, investigators believe they've found their gunman. Now they just have to prove it.
We have to put together a really strong case because neither of these individuals had any history of violence.
After a year of investigation, Fresno police are tracking two suspects in the brutal murders of the Ewell family. Dale Inglee's wealth-obsessed son, Dana, and his best friend, Joel, who's been studying to be a hitman. At this point, gone back to school in Santa Clara, and Joel has moved to LA.
The way they would get a hold of each other was to page each other.
Think back to the early 90s, so we're talking about people still using payphones, people still using pagers.
To keep tabs on the pair, detectives obtain a warrant to clone Joel's pager.
Every time Joel would get a page from Dana, we would get the same page.
There were a couple payphones located at a location not too far from where he lived, and he would go to that location. They were able to basically have all of these different vehicles following Joel and communicating over the radio as to who would take over next. And if you were an expert in surveillance and you were being followed by this group, you would never have known it.
When they started talking, we could send a detective up with a tape recorder in a backpack and go to the other phone and just act like he was having a conversation, hope to get Joel's side of the conversation.
The recordings seem to confirm police suspicions.
He referred to the three-shirt deal, meaning the three family members, and that he needed money and he needed to get out of town.
He actually said, "I want my money and I want it now," because things were stretching out so long. Dana was extremely careful on where he would go, what payphones he would go to, unlike Joel. So it was a little more difficult to get Dana's side of the conversation.
So on May 13th, 1993, investigators paid Dana a visit to try and rattle him.
So they decided to go to Santa Clara University and knock on Dana's dorm door. And Chris Curtis looked at him and said, "We know who killed your family. It was Joel Radosich." Dana then immediately shut the door in Detective Curtis's face.
As soon as we told Dana that we think Joel killed his parents, Dana leaves campus and paged Joel. And that's when things really started to ramp up.
The surveillance team follows Joel to a restaurant in Ontario, California, where they observe him talking to a bartender named Jack Ponce. Detectives want to know why.
Jack Ponce was about the same age as Joel. He and Joel had been friends since they were children.
We need to go and talk to Jack Ponce. Interviewing him was like pulling teeth.
Ponce denies any knowledge of the murders, but after several visits, investigators eventually get him to open up.
You mentioned that the .380, let's go back to that. The .380 was yours, the .22 was yours. Actually, not the .22.
I remember asking him early on if he had a 9mm. He said no, he didn't. I think it was the fifth interview, finally. He goes, I bought a 9mm. I go, what kind of 9mm did you have? Oh, it's an 18-9. It's a really nasty-looking gun. He said he had bought it to shoot squirrels in the attic, which was quite a gun to shoot squirrels with.
Ponce conveniently claims that the gun had been stolen. Hoping to prove it was the murder weapon, investigators compare several AT-9 barrels with the bullet markings from the crime scene.
It just turns out that this particular gun had a very unique twist in the barrel.
The criminalists then recreated the exact silencer that the book described, got an AT-9, and then fired numerous rounds through that silencer.
And that silencer is made with PVC pipe, and you stack it with tennis balls and steel wool. The striation mark came out. They were almost identical to the striation marks on the bullets that were recovered in Glee's body.
The test also explains the fuzzy material found on Glee's clothing.
The fuzz was pieces of tennis ball, the little yellow tennis balls.
Ponce is immediately arrested. It doesn't take him long to turn on Joel Radovich.
He basically spilled it that he had bought the gun, and for Joel.
Ponce says Joel told him exactly how he committed the murders while they were getting rid of the gun.
Joel made the decision to tell Jack what happened. Not because he was confessing, but because you're in this too, buddy, and you need to keep your mouth shut.
Joel said, I shaved all the hair off my body except for my eyelashes and my eyebrows so I wouldn't leave any trace, and I was sitting on a plastic sheet waiting for the three to come home.
There were so many different facts that Jack Ponce knew that he couldn't have known on his own through the media or from anybody but Joel Radovich.
That level of planning that went into the murders was just something that Fresno hadn't experienced.
Ponce even agrees to show investigators where to find the murder weapon.
Joel gave a bag of gun parts, the murder weapon plus the 9mm that was stolen from the scene, to Jack Ponce to get rid of. Jack said he had thrown the parts at a variety of places down in San Fernando Valley, and the barrel of the murder weapon, he said he buried it in a vacant lot in Reseda.
3 years after the murders, who knows at that point if an apartment building or a house has been built on that lot.
He's handcuffed and shackled. He looks down, he goes, right about here. 2 shovels full, we hit something. Started digging around, it was the barrel. You get that piece of information that you know, that aha moment when you go, this son of a bitch did it.
Coming up, investigators are close to making arrests. But will the rich kid get away with murder?
People will look on the outside and say, well, this will be an easy trial. It was not an easy trial.
Bartender Jack Ponce has confessed to participating in a plot to kill millionaire Dale Ewell and his family. And according to Ponce, 21-year-old Dana Ewell was the one pulling the strings.
He was really a turning point in that case, explaining how Dana devised the plan, how he recruited Joel, and how the whole case unfolded. There was an estate worth $7 or $8 million that he reasoned he would collect if there were no other heirs in front of him.
It takes detectives some time to gather all the evidence, but on March 2nd, 1995, the 2 remaining conspirators are finally arrested.
It took 3 years before investigators could arrest Dana and Joel. Part of that is Dana's alibi, backed up by an FBI agent.
We had to continue the investigation for much longer than would normally be done if the individuals were the types that had a significant criminal history. It would be difficult for a jury to find beyond a reasonable doubt that they committed such heinous murders.
It was 3 counts of murder with 3 special circumstances, so it was a death penalty case.
A string of motions and appeals tie up the case for several more years. Prosecutors used the time to build a stronger case.
This case was like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. There were 162 witnesses who testified in this trial. It was building block upon building block.
They laid out a very clear timeline of how Dana organized it with his friend Joel. He provided himself an alibi by going and seeing his girlfriend and having dinner with her family, and her father was an FBI agent.
In 1997, Dana Ewell and Joel Radovich stand trial. Prosecutors come armed with a money trail they use to argue that Dana paid to have his family killed.
We were able to show that Joel was given $125,000 in cash by Dana for no apparent reason other than tying him to the murders.
Joel wants to be a hitman. Then you look at Dana, and he hires everybody to do his dirty work. You know, throwing the money out there.
Their star witness, Jack Ponce, provides the jury with all the details of the plot. But the defense argues that Ponce is an unreliable witness who is only implicating Dana in exchange for immunity.
Anytime a witness is given immunity, their credibility is going to be suspect.
Dana's attorneys took the tack that you can't believe a word that Ponce says.
His testimony was something I thought should have been inadmissible, but it was, well, Joel Radovich told me that Dana Ewell told him, and so you had what's called double hearsay. So the prosecution had to offer an exception, double exception to the hearsay rule there in order to introduce that.
While Dana may be guilty of choosing the wrong friends, the defense insists there is no actual evidence linking him to the crimes.
They had what you would call guilt by association, the relationship between my client and Joel Radovich. So they had, them living together after the murders at the Ewell residence for a while, the paying for helicopter flying lessons, guilt by association evidence.
After an 8-month trial, the jury finally renders a verdict.
It may have been one of the longest deliberations in a criminal case in Fresno County history.
We returned guilty on all counts and also guilty on all enhancements and allegations.
Some people cried, some people laughed, a whole range of emotions because it was such a long case.
However, there's one thing the jury can't agree on.
In California, it has to be a unanimous death verdict. This wasn't, so that left them with the only thing of life without parole, which is mandatory on a death case if the jury can't decide on death. I was extremely glad that I didn't have to sign that verdict as the foreman sentencing them to death. I was very relieved. Now, I had voted the death penalty, but I was glad I didn't have to sign that paper with my name.
To investigators, it's a fitting sentence. In his greed, Dana Ewell had been willing to do anything to become a billionaire. Instead, he destroyed his family and lost everything, including his freedom.
To see a family massacred and then ultimately by a child strips away a bit of the veneer of our comfort, of our society.
I really believe that Dana had a short circuit or a disconnect. He was arrogant. He thought he was the smartest person in the room. To this day, I have no sympathy for him whatsoever.
This guy's a perfect psychopath.
I have always thought, at least for Dana, that the worst day of his life was not the day that he was arrested. The worst day of his life was not the day he was convicted. The worst day was the day his last appeal expired. And now he knows every day for the rest of his life, his home is prison.